The news broke this morning, and I was actually very surprised when that news broke, talking about Steve leaving his role at Mamelodi Sundowns to join Swallows FC. What did you make of that?
Yes, probably we were a little less surprised in South Africa. So Steve Komphela, Mngqithi, and Rulani Mokwena were the three co-coaches who took over from Pitso Mosimane when Pitso became Al Ahly coach. In the past season, in October, Rulani Mokwena was promoted to the sole head coach. Manqoba, who was kind of the second, got demoted to the third, and Steve Komphela got promoted to the second. They had different titles. Steve is the senior coach, Manqoba. The first team coach, and Manqoba is the senior coach. They've got strange titles, but basically he was the second in command to Rulani after that coaching shuffle in October. And then Rulani Mokwena went on a very, very successful streak, broke a lot of records, won 15 matches in the PSL, reached the semi-finals of the CAF Champions League, and narrowly went out on away goals against Wydad. Probably one of Sundowns' best runs since they won the Champions League in 2016. So Rulani really is the head coach who calls the shots now. Steve Komphela is a very experienced coach. He coached Kaizer Chiefs for about 3 years. He didn't win trophies there, but has been around South Africa a long time. He's actually a former Bafana captain in the early 1990s, before Bafana won the Nations Cup in 96. Very experienced. He was certainly an experienced part of that coaching trio. But I think since Rulani Mokwena has become the sole head coach, the other two in the coaching trio might be looking at other pastures and to do more of a head coaching job. They are very experienced, both of them, Steve Komphela and Mngqithi. So I think it makes sense from a point of view of Steve probably looking for a new project where he can be a head coach again, even though Sundowns are now the biggest club in South Africa financially. The biggest club support-wise is still Kaizer Chiefs, but Sundowns are huge financially and they pay very well. I think it speaks to Steve wants to get back into head coaching, so I can kind of understand that.
All right, this also takes me back to England, when Mikel Arteta was an assistant manager to Pep Guardiola while he was at Manchester City. And of course, a lot of people pointed towards Arteta, saying that he knows this job and he wants to take up a major managerial position. And now he is the Arsenal manager, and a lot of Arsenal fans are believing in the process right there for Arsenal and Mikel Arteta. Now, for Steve, do you see the same thing with him as he moves over to Swallows?
Yes, there's definitely similarities. I like the parallel you draw. I think, look, there are coaches who don't mind being an assistant coach, and I think Mikel Arteta and Pep Guardiola probably worked really well. I think the coaching trio that at Sundowns worked well. They won a league title, the fifth of the 6 successive PSL titles that Sundowns have won was under the coaching trio. The 6th was under Rulani Mokwena as head coach last season. Sundowns are just completely dominant now in South African football. And you've seen how well they perform in the Champions League, even though they haven't managed to reach a final again. They're constantly in the quarterfinals and semi-finals. But yeah, for Steve, I think it's certainly about moving somewhere where he can be a head coach again. And yeah, Swallows have an interesting history. They were one of the big 3 clubs in South Africa going back to the 1950s. They've got a very long history. In the 1970s and 80s, they were a very big team. They started to go into decline in the 1990s. They got relegated in about 2014, and they've come back. They dropped way down to about the 4th tier, the amateur ranks, and they actually were resurrected by some businessmen, and they've been brought back. They've been back for about 3 seasons. They had a good first season, finishing 6th. They fought relegation the next 2 seasons. So they've had some financial issues, and they'll be looking to restore the birds. Swallows were one of the big clubs in South Africa, and they've gone into a decline, and they're trying to resurrect themselves. So I think it's a project that Steve will, being so steeped in South African football knowledge and having been around for such a long time, we'll see as a really good project to try to help restore Swallows to their former glory.
All right, talking about Swallows and being able to get Steve over to the club, Do you consider this as one of the major coup plots in the South Africa PSL?
I think so. I think for Swallows, so he's going to have a good team in his coaching staff. So what happened was last season, Swallows at about the 2/3 stage of the season were I think last place or second last. Correct me if I'm wrong. They were in a desperate situation, maybe third last. And the German coach Ernst Mindorp, quite a journeyman coach who's coached Kaiser Chiefs twice, left to a third division club in the Bundesliga 3. At that very critical stage, and a lot of people predicted doom and gloom and that they might be relegated. Ex-player of the club, Middendorp's assistant, Musa Nyatama, took over as caretaker coach and steered them to the top 8 in the league out of a 16-team league. And they actually survived relegation very comfortably. So Musa Nyatama is going to work as Steve's assistant coach. And I think the two of them working together, I'm sure Musa, Steve is a very easy coach to work with because he's known as one of the complete gentlemen in South Africa, and I think it's not going to be taken as a threat by Musa Nyatama that he's now got to work under someone else. And I think Musa having shown such potential in knowing the team so well, and Steve Komphela with his experience, I think the pair can do well. And I think it'd be nice if they could aim for a top 6 in the coming season, even better maybe.
All right, we'll see how that turns out for Swallows in the next season, talking about the PSL season. But for Mamelodi Sundowns, where does this leave the club and, of course, Rulani Mokwena?
Yeah, that's a good question, Udoka. Look, Sundowns. When Pitso Mosimane left Sundowns just over 2 years ago to go to Al Ahly, a lot of people were like, "Wow, Sundowns might fall apart." And the coaching trio, they didn't fall apart. If anything, they maybe got a bit stronger in some ways. So the coaching trio of Steve, Manqoba, and Rulani certainly took the club forward from what had been built by Pitso Mosimane. And let's not forget, Pitso, it was a bit like Alex Ferguson. The club hadn't won in 6 years, maybe not quite as dramatic, but the club hadn't won a trophy in 6 years. They tried a lot of European coaches. Johan Neeskens, there were a lot of big name Europeans that came and then didn't succeed. Pitso turned them into a team that won 11 trophies in 8 years, won the Champions League. Yeah. The 3 that took over carried on that, and Sundowns remained very strong. I think it leaves Sundowns. Rulani, I think, wants to be a head coach and doesn't really want to work in a coaching trio sort of situation. And I think the other thing is Mngqithi, the other third coach who was at Sundowns, his contract ends at the end of the coming season. There's a lot of speculation. He'll probably want a head coaching job somewhere too. But I think Rulani has done very well at bolstering his backroom staff. So I think he'll get a good assistant, and it'd be interesting to see who he would bring if Manqoba does leave at the end of the coming season. But Rulani's shown tremendous potential. He's under 40 years old. He was Pitso's prodigy, Pitso Mosimane's prodigy at Sundowns. He's a nephew of Joe Masona, one of the greats of South African football. He's got that football royalty in his blood, and started coaching at such a young age. He's known as a complete techno-boffin of coaches in South Africa, and is the emerging probably successor to Pitso Mosimane. And that's why I think he wanted the head coaching job, because he wants to start working on that part of his aspect of his career. And I think Rulani, it'd be very interesting to see if he does bring any other assistants. After Manqoba leaves, he will have to bring. But I think Rulani is the man to take Sundowns forward, is the way the club sees Rulani.
All right, we'll see how far that takes Rulani. But there are also rumors that are pointed towards Rulani becoming the Bafana head coach. I mean, there's no smoke without fire, as they always say. But is this anywhere possible in the near future?
I think Rulani will concentrate on any young coach has his trials and tribulations, and Rulani Mokwena left Sundowns at one stage and went to Orlando Pirates and worked as an assistant coach to Micho, Militon Sredojevic, and did well. The pair did pretty well. They were unlucky not to win the league, challenging a great Sundowns team. But when he became a caretaker coach after Micho left, it was a bit of a struggle. And now he's gone to Sundowns and he's got an environment where he can really flourish. And I think he'll spend a few years finding his feet as a head coach there. Also, Bafana, It's a bit of a poison chalice. It's such, Bafana's underachievement of 2 decades is well documented. I think people around Africa can't understand why South Africa can't produce a good team. And it's certainly a challenge that a lot of South Africans want to take on, but they're also aware of how difficult it is. And the kind of lack of quality, genuinely quality players that South Africa has compared to the big guns in Africa. So I think it would be something he'd look at, and he'd certainly, but I think he'd want to establish himself a bit more in club football before doing something like that, and seeing if he can help that situation with Bafana.
All right. Thank you very much, Mark Streetum, for talking to us about Steve's employment right there at Swallows, and also speaking on Rulani Mokwena. Do enjoy the rest of your day, Mark.
It's always fun. Thanks for having me, Doctor.